Hello and welcome to episode 253 of the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, which is a bonus episode. If you listened to the previous episode, well, welcome back. I was talking to Tim Burgess from Shield GEO and we hadn't caught up in ages, so our conversation went on for what even I consider a length that's a little bit too long for this show. So today is the continuation of that conversation, and yesterday's episode we looked at different articles about the world of work. But today we talk about different conferences we've been to and other virtual not distant news. And Tim shares what they've been doing over Shield GEO in the way of virtual retreats. So let's have a look now at the news from Virtual Not Distant and Shield GEO. So Tim, as I was mentioning, I had the pleasure and the honor and the luck of being involved in 3 conferences over the last 2 weeks. So remember, we are recording on the 6th of November, 2020. And I wanted to share this with you and listeners just because, well, they were set up in completely different formats. And I think that they suited each community and the scale of each one. So the first one I was involved with was the IAF England and Wales conference. And originally, or last year, it was a 2-day conference in Birmingham. And this year it went online and it was a week long. So the conference started with a coffee session you could go to in the mornings. Then there was a whole program, 1 track only. And then in the evenings, there was a networking session where you could just hop in and talk about whatever. And then there were a couple of after work sessions. One was Murder by Zoom by Vic Hopkins, which was a murder mystery party, but online. And then there was a wine tasting by Pilar, who is also a multicultural trainer. And she talked about the history of wine and everything. So really, really full. And the meeting point for delegates was the platform Meetup. So what they did was they created a Meetup group on Meetup. And when you bought your ticket, you were added to that. And then each host of each session created a Meetup event. So people actually could sign up to the event. So as host, you saw how many people were signing up. People could talk to you in the Meetup page about the session, follow up and stuff. And then everything was run on Zoom. And it worked very well. There were about 100 of us, not more. And some people, I think, enjoyed it more than they think they would have if it had been in person. So it was really well organized. And I think that using Meetup in that way, which is where the community is, because IAF is, before lockdown, was a very in-person community. And you just went to Meetup to sign up to events. So that's where everyone was. So they met people where they were, and then we just expanded. So really interesting. Very different one, also happening around that time and also having moved from in-person to online was Agile Tour London, which are organized by Jennifer Riggins and friends. And it was also run on Zoom, but all the community conversation took place in Slack. So it felt to me like people were used to Slack who were in that community. And one thing that they had that we hadn't set up in the IAF conference was they had a coffee room. So pretty much like a GitLab, I think, has an open coffee room all the time. They had one up. And what they found was that people were not really popping in just to say hi and chat about anything. So they started to organize activities around it. So they planned, going back to planned spontaneity and how deliberate we need to be about our interactions. They planned ways of people to come and be together informally rather than say, oh, just turn up and see what happens. And then finally, yesterday and today, it's the Repeople conference, which used to be NomadCity. And of course, that used to be Gran Canaria. And they've gone onto the platform Hopin, which has been built for conferences. And that really suited that community because there were about 300 people there yesterday. And I think that community thrives on talks, panels. So very much we see ourselves reflected in the person leading the conversation, and we can contribute in the chat, etc. And it's a very strong community that has been building up over the years. So it really felt right for them. So Yeah, have you been to any events recently, or I don't know, what do you think? I think the variety is fascinating.
It is. Yeah, I must admit, I would be very interested to see the IAF because I've been to a couple of events with folks who are skilled facilitators, and the experience that you have is just a different level in terms of the way they can sort of set a room and make it inclusive and keep people engaged is a real treat. So that I mean, I'm amazed they managed to do it for a week. That seems like a long time on a virtual conference. Did it feel like that?
The wonderful thing for me was that it was really funny in the debrief afterwards. Someone was saying, I didn't think there'd be anyone who would want to go to all the sessions, so we didn't design breaks in between sessions. And it
Wow.
yeah, it was because of that. So some people did do almost a back-to-back, but I only went there's one day when I went to one session and networking only. What I really liked was that I could integrate the conference into my, I wouldn't say daily schedule, but into my week. So I picked which sessions I was going to. I'd come in and out. I'd carry on, do some work, then whatever. But it felt like a week. I think, and going back to our earlier conversation about what makes you comfortable in the online space, I am someone who I just get transported really easily through a computer somewhere. So I felt I'd been away for a week with this group of people. And then the following week is like, where are they all? And the fact, of course, that I already knew a lot of them, that was interesting. There was a lot of breakout room activity. By the end, I was like, please, not another breakout room activity. But that is the way to meet people in conferences, is through having conversations in the sessions also, where you are given that structure of what to talk about. And so you can just go, instead of, for people like me who are so bad at chit chat, to have to think about what I'm going to talk about. So yeah,
I can totally relate to that. Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, one of the difficulties that I face is being in Sydney. A lot of these conferences, I would have loved to have gone to the Repeople one, but I think it starts at 3:00 in the morning, my time.
Yes.
But I did actually attend Business of Software in Boston, and I basically went on to I think it started at 11 p.m. my time and finished at about 4 or 5 in the morning. And so I arranged with my family that for those 3 days, I was just going to be, a zombie. I basically got jet lag without traveling. But it was much better than having to fly and go through all of that palaver just to attend. And they did a brilliant job. And I think you mentioned this just now. One of the things they did really well was, historically it had been like a 45, 50-minute talk with 10 minutes for questions. In this conference, they shrank it down. So the talks were maybe 20, 25 minutes. Mm-hmm. And the questions were the rest of the time. And then they also got the speakers to do sort of masterclasses, which is basically like a facilitated breakout room, mm-hmm. where they would go really deep on the topic that they're a specialist in. And that was so, if you're going to learn and sort of sit at the feet of a great teacher and sort of absorb what they've got, that was a fantastic way to do it.
Nice. That sounds really, really nice. So that was me and my own freelancing retreats. How about you? What you mentioned before we started recording, that you've been doing some stuff for your people, for your team to hop together online in real time. What's some of the stuff you've been doing, and why, more importantly?
So we've got a very distributed team, and our company retreat was meant to be in Bali in May. Paid the deposit for the hotel. We were just about to start booking flights, and then the pandemic hit, and we were like, oh, let's wait and see. Maybe we'll book flights next week. And then I think late Feb, early March, we went, oh, okay, it's not going to happen, and we cancelled it. And once the first rush of sort of lockdowns and all of that chaos subsided, there was a real sense of loss that we weren't going to get to meet up. Mm-hmm. I remember actually at one point I was in a meeting or in a discussion with someone, and they said, we'd be in Bali right now. And I basically had to go back to bed for the day. I was so depressed.
Oh no.
Because you get so excited by the prospect. Working virtually is great, but actually getting to spend a little bit of FaceTime with people who you've built these strong relationships with is such fun. So what we decided to do was to run some some ways to sort of repeat a little bit of that experience. And because our team is, we're in, I think, 17 different countries, we couldn't get everybody together at the same time. Time zone wise, it's just impractical. And so what we've done is we've run a series of events. We run 3 a month. So we run one for the APAC region, so Asia Pacific, one for EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, Africa, and one for the Americas. Same format, but we run it 3 times in 24 hours. We record them and people can watch the other ones. And we started off just doing fun stuff like, we did some trivia and that sort of thing. And then the most recent one, which I think might be the most interesting one to talk to you about, is we wanted to explore a little bit around cultural differences and cultural sensitivity. So we asked a series of questions to 9 people within our company, 3 from each region. And the questions like, is it okay to talk about religion at work in your country? What's the most popular sport that gets talked about at work in your country? And what do you do for Christmas in your country, and so on? And then we ran a quiz where we asked people to guess the answers from people in other regions. So, things they should know.
Oh, wow.
And we had the video recordings of their answers. So we would ask them, how do you think Christmas is celebrated in Mexico? And then we'd play Brenda, a colleague who's Mexican, explaining how it actually happens. And it was so much fun. We learned a whole lot. It reminded people that there's lots that they don't know and that there's a whole side to people on the other side of the screen or the Slack message that you don't know about, but you can find out if you ask.
Wow. I love the mixed stuff of people recording or maybe answering some questions. I love the mix. Were you doing any real-time interactions? Because you said you recorded those 3 sessions that you had in one day, but was it people together?
Yeah, so basically we get the APAC group together. So it's like 17 people. We put all of them into a Zoom and we run breakout rooms and we do icebreakers and all the rest of it. So we do a live event with them, but we record that event.
Right.
And to be honest, actually, it means we've got a lot of recordings. And so actually there's been a little bit of feedback that some folks feel under pressure that they've got to watch like 3 hours of video. So actually I just announced it this evening just to make sure people know they don't have to watch everything. But for me, for example, one of the things I bought in the lockdown was a rowing machine. And so I can persuade myself that I'm working if I'm watching a video of a conversation that other people have had while I'm on my rowing machine. Yeah. And I don't particularly love being on the rowing machine. And, the videos are okay, but it's not necessarily the greatest use of time. But if you put them together, I feel very virtuous while I go about that activity.
Wow, I hadn't thought of that because I was having just yesterday a conversation about how there's how so much stuff gets recorded online and parallel to this, especially looking at events and workshops, how just people say, well, I'll just watch the recording. But actually, this is a time I hadn't thought of that you can record what's going on. And then the expectation is not that someone's going to sit down and watch it intently and take notes, but actually that they can catch up with the conversation while they're doing something else, pretty much like a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, like this podcast has been good inspiration for us in terms of doing it. And my role in the company, I guess, it's part of my job, to be honest, to know what's going on and to get a sense. But watching people in those conversations and seeing them interact is something I really enjoy. And so, it's one of the challenges actually that we face is that the folks in the Americas are a really tight group. They've got a Skype group that they chat on. They have a call every Friday where they have drinks and they celebrate each other's birthdays and so on. But they miss colleagues in Asia Pacific because they don't get to talk to us that much. And so recording is it's one way we're experimenting with to try to give them a sense of, oh yeah, there are human beings over there. And, I can get a little bit of a sense of who they are and what they're about.
Wow, that is interesting as well, because one thing we were talking earlier about CEOs wanting to go back to the office and how that can cascade and actually remove this feeling of flexibility that we have. But actually, I think that sometimes we do forget that those in senior management positions and CEOs, they also lose visibility of what's happening in the organization. And if you're someone who really likes to connect deeply with people, this is a great way, and there's different ways of doing it. It doesn't mean that we have to have a meeting with every person all the time, or there are other ways of doing it so that, yeah, it's not the same thing as, sitting, having a coffee with someone, but actually if there are things that we're not involved with that can be recorded, and then that can help us to gain that sense of connection. That's another way of using the online space. That's wonderful.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, and look, I'm imagining there might be somebody who's listening to this conversation we're having right now who's played around with video or, a combination of live and asynchronous communications within their company or had experience of it. And I'd love to hear from them, because it's something that, we're playing around with a little bit. And I'm sure other people have done great things that I'd love to know about.
Thank you for that, Tim. I'm sure that listeners will be, I found it all very interesting, as you can see. I always do. So I'm just going to start wrapping up just with, I wanted to thank Annelise, who I'm connected to on LinkedIn, who came to a webinar I ran on visible teamwork. And her comment made me think of something. So regular listeners will know, and I've just mentioned, visible teamwork is a set of principles: deliberate communication, work visibility, and planned spontaneity. And when I introduced those concepts, I pull from examples of what other people are doing. It's really been me looking at the online world and going, I think more or less everyone's doing the same thing in different ways with different tools, but it goes around this. And she commented, she said that she talked about this with a friend, and the friend had gone, oh yeah, I'm doing a lot of that, but also that's interesting. And it made me think that what I'm doing it's nothing new. I'm providing a framework to help team leaders direct their attention to the kind of interactions, because it's about interactions that they might want to encourage in their teams. And through these principles, also giving teams a vocabulary, a new way of describing those interactions. So I am hoping that I'll get more of, in our teams, our conversations are in the open, or we make our thinking visible, rather than, hey, we use Slack. Which is usually what you get. So it's interesting that, the space needs a new vocabulary, because the shortcuts are towards the tool names, but the tool names don't say anything about the team or how they work. So I'm hoping to influence that. And then just one other thing for listeners, we've got 3 shorter than normal episodes coming up on the current state of work. So I mentioned earlier, I talked to Chris Mullen about global survey they've done about how employees perceive that leadership in organizations have dealt with the COVID area pandemic. Then I talked also to someone who'd done a survey in the UK around flexible workspaces, and I'm also going to talk to Katrina Bolek-Carbonell about Ireland. So a recent survey that has taken place in Ireland. So I think those are timely. So I will release them as fast as possible. And I decided that I would do them as separate episodes rather than clump them all in one. And it was Andrew Saunders is the other person that I spoke to. So that sounds good. It was good for me for the recording, so I hope listeners, you enjoy that. Tim, thank you so much for sitting in a mammoth episode, sitting in for Maya, who I'm sure is very grateful that you're keeping her seat warm, and we say hello.
Thank you, Maya, for giving me the opportunity to come on and try and fill your shoes. It's been an absolute pleasure, and that's it. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's always great to catch up with you, Pilar. And actually, one thought that came to me just when you were talking about the vocabulary and how you're sort of framing that, something that I've really realized with the sort of consulting work that you do, it can be very helpful for teams and organizations to have that outside perspective, because you do get sort of rigid in your thinking and your processes and how you're doing things. And it's very helpful to have someone come in and go, actually, why are you doing it this way? And what are you actually trying to achieve? And is there another way of looking at it? Which I think is what you're trying to describe, right?
Yes, that's always it. It's you're doing this. Is this really what you want to be doing? I think this is the first question. And is there anything you want to change? And is there anything you want to stop doing, really? And then just giving that extra, said, okay, well, this is how other people are doing it, and this is what you might consider looking at how you're working. So, yeah, the outside perspective. It's so easy to be an outsider. Also, I always come in and I go, yeah, you can do this and you can do that, and everyone looks at me going, yeah, but we don't have time. And I completely empathize, and it is very hard. I do completely understand that it is very hard to adopt some of these, what are essentially new habits and new ways of working that sometimes go against our instinct and the way in which we've been doing things for a long while. So I do appreciate that. Yeah. Good. Well, thank you, Tim. And listeners, if you want to hear more of Tim's reflections, we have a 7-part series on connection and disconnection in remote teams, hosted by Rika Jati, who works with Tim in Shield GEO. And I encourage you, if you are thinking about how to take this forward, then you need to listen to that series, because and actually we recorded it outside of pandemic times. So we are looking at the effects in the long run also of having remote workers and working in distributed organizations. So virtualnotdistant.com for your comments, Pilar at virtualnotdistant.com, and Tim, what's your Twitter handle?
Planet Burgess.
Planet Burgess. And is that the best way to get hold of you if they want to comment on anything you've said today?
Yeah. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, Tim Burgess, Shield GEO. I'm on there as well.
Excellent. All right, listeners, thank you very much for listening. A big thank you for listening to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, produced by Virtual Not Distant. If you have something to add to the conversation, let us know through the contact form over at virtualnotdistant.com. I have been your host, Pilar Orti, and I'm signing off now. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy.